So Manchester is still red, and Michael Carrick has an opportunity to make another mark on the title race when he visits North London. We are dissecting all, as well as the never-ending chatter from ex-players and the prospects of a midfield arrival at Old Trafford on the latest episode of the Theatre of Red. Ladies and gents, yet another traumatic chapter in Manchester United history was brushed aside in the most splendid of manner as the Michael Carrick era began in the most magnificent of ways. Now, naturally, we here at the Theatre of Red have been inundated with messages and emails from Sunday's outing. How bloody pleasing is it to see all of this happiness and joy and giddiness and whatever else comes with it? God knows, I think this is a fan base that deserves a little bit of something. Having been lucky enough to get to know this week's guest over the years, I don't think we have ever shared a largely positive conversation on this podcast. So, given the circumstances, it's not a bad time to have a chat today, Mr. Sam Pilger. Have you been able to return to your level-headed state after the most euphoric of days in a very long time?
It was rather wonderful on Monday to just watch the footage again and sort of bask in a performance, not just a victory. You know, the Liverpool game in earlier in the season was wonderful. To win at Anfield is probably the best, and especially late on. But that was a little bit smash and grab. But we played quite well. But this was an absolute dominant performance, and it has been wonderful because, of course, the football has been so miserable and the results have been so miserable lately. So, it was hugely enjoyable.
It's funny you say that because I wrote immediately after the game that we may have witnessed the finest Old Trafford performance since Sir Alex Ferguson waved goodbye. And I don't think I was getting ahead of myself, and I'm not disregarding memorable outings like the FA Cup final, Ten Hag's showing against Xavi's Barcelona, or Van Gaal's Anfield trip. And there is many more that I could list. I think in terms of a complete display from back to front, highlighting everything from defensive assurity to positive and confident attacking football. And probably the most important, the fact that we saw a 90-minute display. I think this has to be right up there when considering the nature of issues at the club and the level of opposition, albeit they will point towards absentees when it suits them, Sam.
You know, I mean, I hadn't contemplated that myself. And as you were speaking there, you said it was the best Old Trafford performance and one of the best performances anywhere since Sir Alex retired. I was trying to think along those lines, and I think I think you'd certainly say top five. That's very easy. Go top five. It may well be the best because it was so accomplished, so dominant. 2-0 does not take into account it could have been 5 or 6 very comfortably. City had, I mean, I'm not a huge XG fan, but I was interested to see that City had a 0.47 XG, which was their lowest in the Premier League for 5 years. This is the all-conquering Manchester City. So while United have improved attacking-wise this season, United have still let in a lot of goals, and yet we just weren't flustered by City at all. So it was the complete performance. It was you've seen the footage of almost having a rondo in the middle of the game around City's players, so assured, so confident on the ball, ripped them apart. Very lucky, 3 offside goals, 2 of them by a toenail. One of them was still quite not sure why it was, that the last one, Mount's goal. Maguire hitting the crossbar, Ahmad hitting the post. Casemiro should have scored from 2 yards out. Even at, Fernandez and Mbeumo should have scored together where they sort of messed up in the first half. It was an incredible performance where there was, I feel, I think there was a trepidatious feel about it too, because United have so often taken the lead this season and then lost it. But actually, 2-0, 3-0 would probably be more reflective of the game. Thinking about it, I mean, strangely, I did think when Amarin left, actually, he probably given me my best visit to Old Trafford since Sir Alex, which was the Lyon game. Probably, remember beforehand, my daughter asked me, "Oh, what's your favourite game at Old Trafford?" And it was difficult to tell. I mean, strangely, it might be in the Amorim era. It was the Lyon game, which was such a incredible game, the 5-4 and Maguire's last-minute winner. But in terms of, but that wasn't quite a performance. But in terms of an overall performance, this City game was incredible.
I think so. And you've mentioned XG. It is a very, very dirty word to start speaking about. There's a lot of people don't like it, but I did actually see something after the game. I'm not 100% if it was his Premier League career or his entire career, but the nature of the defeat was the highest XG defeat that Pep Guardiola had received as a coach. Like that's saying something. That really typifies the level of dominance that was in that game. And it's only natural that a certain subsection of support would start getting giddy after this. You even see some discussing the prospect of what Carrick could do if given the reins for a prolonged period of time. I'm sure wiser heads will appreciate that one swallow doesn't make a summer. We have seen plenty of false dawns from this group beforehand. That's something I said immediately afterwards as well. But you have to applaud the man for arriving, galvanizing the dressing room, and from multiple reports, immediately installing a feel-good factor in Carrington. It aids this inevitable new manager bounce heading into a game that, respectfully, every player in that dressing room should require zero incentive to play in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you look back in just recent history, United haven't even got the new manager bounce. I mean, if you remember, Amorim got outplayed at Ipswich. We were lucky to get a draw. And, within weeks, we started sliding down the table. There was no new manager bounce there. Even Darren Fletcher, it feels a little bit unfair, but, he didn't win in his 2 games. We couldn't beat relegation-bound Burnley and Brighton in the Cup at home. So the fact that Carrick was able to do it against Pep Guardiola and, the only worthy challenger to Sir Alex Ferguson's title was the, Premier League's greatest manager or British football's greatest manager in the space of a couple of days, it makes it even more sort of fanciful, like a fairy tale or something. I feel clearly. I don't think the player Amorim never lost the players, but clearly him leaving was a weight lifted, and Carrick. The simple things. He played players in their strongest positions. Fernandez as a 10, Mainu back in, a back 4. The simplicity that we've been crying out for from Amorim that he's probably never going to give us, too stubborn to. So it will be interesting. I mean, people say, oh yeah, maybe Carrick, give it to him. I mean, that's far too early after 90 minutes. But it was hugely impressive because, Solskjaer, won his first game was at 5-0 at Cardiff, but that was at Cardiff. This was against City at Old Trafford after a terrible run of form or lost opportunities because the broken record of if United win this, they're in the top 4. I couldn't quite believe it when my son said to me, "Oh, if United win this top 4," I was like, "Still? How are we still getting these opportunities?" Yeah. But he was right. We actually finally grasped it. So it's hugely promising, and although then it doesn't get any tougher this season. Arsenal away the next game, so we'll have a better idea. But United really go there with a lot more confidence now.
That's for sure. Keeping in that line what your son said about the top 4, not only was the result a fantastic day for United, but results elsewhere really went in favour of United as well. I was speaking right before that about, how Carrick came in and galvanised essentially. But I can't help but draw back to last week's episode of the podcast. I was speaking with Jamie Jackson, and I referenced how so many of the final performances under Ruben Amorim had the feeling of many of the final games under Ten Hag. That's what I was saying to you off air, whereby there was lots of possession, ample opportunities to score, but the players simply didn't look like they could get the job done even if they were given 180 minutes, let alone 90. Now, I have no intentions of being a downer here. This is a magnificent time to be a Red. Carrick has excelled in such a short period of time ahead of yet another challenging outing, as you've stated. But I can't help but ask the question about where this desire and intensity from the group was beforehand. It wasn't like enhanced performances, it's like we were witnessing 11 different players. And surely that wasn't accomplished after 3 days of training, Sam.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you're right to be surprised and a bit dubious. I mean, I think Michael Carrick is obviously a competent, accomplished man, certainly as a player and as a coach. I mean, but how was he able to achieve that so quickly? I mean, maybe there was a bigger depth of feeling against Amorim than we were aware of. Really, maybe that's the secret, because I never felt that old cliche, had he lost the dressing room. I didn't think he did. I think United players kept playing for him, kept wanting to try and win, and the results weren't great recently, but they kept battling, they kept trying. But immediately he leaves the building and something lifted from them. Maybe they weren't even aware of it. But as I said, it's the simplicity of, Bruno Fernandes. I think he creates 6 really good opportunities. Well, of course he did. He was in the number 10 position. He was closer to goal. United looked more accomplished in midfield because Kobbie Mainoo was there with a performance that just had you thinking, why was he out of the team for so long? And the fact that, I know he came on Manuel Ugarte as a substitute, the fact that he wasn't near the team. Casemiro seemed, who has obviously had a comeback for a while now. I wouldn't even call it a comeback. It's been over a year or so. I think he was man of the match. I mean, there was actually such competition for man of the match. Normally there isn't much, but you could have given it to 5 or 6 players. He was obviously lifted as well. So sometimes the answer, we're sort of grappling for the answer, but clearly I think it might be that the players probably didn't realise what a burden they were under Amorim, and maybe they kept trying to make his system and formation work, and as soon as they were told that you didn't have to, then they felt better. But saying that, though, obviously they had to take 2 games against under Darren Fletcher, and the Brighton game was pretty dreadful. Burnley, United should have won. Burnley managed to draw 2-2 with 1 shot on target, which is quite an achievement. They should have won. There were a lot of wasted opportunities there. I don't know. I think in Carrick, I mean, the bravery, really. I mean, when the team was leaked and Šeško wasn't in the team, you thought, oh, well, that's a bum steer. That can't be the team. Hang on, the guy's just scored 3 goals in 2 games. Surely that's not true, but it was true. And without United's number 9, only real recognised number 9, who just scored 3 goals in 2 games, United looked better than ever in attack. So he's a brave manager as well, Carrick. So I think it's a combination of Carrick. Obviously got something about him. It's too early to judge. We'll see more in the coming weeks. And Amorim, the sort of depression that Amorim had introduced to the club was probably greater than people realised, and it lifted them, immediately.
Yeah, I suppose so. A lot of it maybe typifies what was a truly excellent playing career. He was a man, as a footballer, who did all of the basic stuff excellently and then just added little bits when it was required. It's that level of intelligence and understanding of the game. And we saw a lot of that against Manchester City. There was nothing extravagant. It was putting players, as you said, in the correct positions and doing the basic stuff correctly. And when you do that, then everything else just seems to fall into play. But despite all of this positivity that we are enjoying, there is one thing that we must discuss, because the frustration of ex-players doing their utmost to be heard has transitioned from background noise to something that is now publicly affecting the dressing room. I remember many, many, many months ago, myself and yourself speaking about Alejandro Garnacho and his social media exploits, and maybe we had slightly differing opinions at the time. But now we see Paul Scholes and Nicky Butt getting plenty of social notoriety for their unnecessary digs at Lisandro Martinez's size, his capabilities of dealing with Erling Haaland. Roy Keane continuously having something to say, even opting to turn his attention towards Michael Carrick's wife at one stage. And then not forgetting Gary Neville, who, despite what he wants everyone to believe, I think he attempts to be so neutral that he comes across as a man who has nothing but bad to say about the club. When any of the boys are then pulled up on their behaviour, they immediately turn to this dated ideology about everything that they put up with as players. And you need to have thick skin when playing for United. Now, when I hear this, Sam, I can't help but think of a similar debate that occurs in America with Michael Jordan and LeBron James in the NBA. And given Jordan never encountered a fraction of what modern media has become, while LeBron has been given 24/7 attention since he came out of high school. So these ex-United players, they never experienced anything like the level of scrutiny that modern footballers receive, particularly when they were all publicly shielded by the most respected man in the game, and Sir Alex Ferguson. I must read something out to you that I had jotted down before we spoke. I have it in front of me here. And given everything this group of players says and writes, when you hear this, I think all you can do is laugh. Okay, I have three figures for you, Sam. 38.7%, 35.71%, and 30.77%. So 38.7, 35.7, and 30.77. Now, these are the individual managerial win percentages of Roy Keane, Gary Neville, and Paul Scholes. So, given everything that these gentlemen have to say about everything that's going wrong at United, you think they'd have a little more savvy than to not throw stones when they're inside in glass houses. I have no problem with educated critique and feedback with footballers. It's what we do for a living. But what they are doing is anything but. And I would love to know, as a man of your stature, what do you think of it all? What's your take on everything that's going on?
I think that, in short, that the Gary Neville, Paul Scholes, and David, sorry, not David Beckham,
Nicky Butt, Roy Keane.
Yeah, Roy Keane, would hate themselves as Keane, Scholes, Butt, Neville as players would hate Keane, Scholes, Butt, Keane as pundits. They would hate themselves. You transport back to the 90s, early 90s, if they were as a figure as they are now speaking about them, they would detest them. And it's a sort, that I have to admit, there is as a writer and as a journalist, there is a sort of inbuilt sort of resentment that these players are not overly helpful with the media during their playing days. I've interviewed all of them and liked all of them at separate times, and yet after they finish, they become the media. Well, you didn't feel so inclined to be help the media when you were players, and then they sort of take the jobs of the media. I feel that they would hate themselves as pundits, and that's the irony, really. And I was really disappointed with Scholes and Butt. I haven't seen the thing. I've only seen clips, and maybe if I watch the whole thing, I might be wrong. I've only seen the quotes of Scholes and Butt's podcast, which came out yesterday on Monday, where they talk about Martinez biting back at them. But I was disappointed that they didn't go, do you know what? We got that wrong. I'm sorry. And we all do that. We all speak, and I make mistakes, and maybe I've gone too far, or they just go, do you know what? Martinez is a World Cup winner and deserves more respect. And I think the thing is that you talk about punditry and knowledge and the sort of lazy punditry. They spoke from a position of ignorance, because Martinez, in 6 games against Haaland, has stopped him scoring 5 out of 6 times. It's now 6 out of 7 times. It's an incredible record. So, and also, do they forget, Martinez, the 2024 FA Cup final, where Martinez came back and helped lead United to that trophy? I don't remember. Oh, Haaland hit the crossbar. Other than that, he didn't have much of a sniff. You're talking about a World Cup winner here, and they were so disrespectful. I thought they might say, do you know what, we got that one wrong. Because I think their podcast is good and it's live and it's interesting. Obviously, got the wealth of experience. They're interesting people to listen to. But I just think they overstretched. I think you're right in what you say, Jordan and LeBron James. I actually interviewed LeBron James many years ago, and he has.
I didn't realize that.
Yes, yeah, I did. Yeah, I went to Akron and Cleveland to see him, and then saw him again in London. Fascinating character. But he broached both eras of before and after social media, and I feel like for Scholes and Puck to say, oh, well, we had to put up with criticism. You're right, what you say, Shaun, that they didn't have any of it. Social media did not exist. And podcasts didn't exist. TikTok didn't exist. The breadth and the constant nature. MUTV and Sky Sports News were only launched during their careers, 1998. The most they had, and I remember this, the most they had was David Meek in the Manchester Evening News. Their scores out of 10, that all papers do now. And I won't name the player, but referred to as Sneaky Meeky because they didn't like that one week they got a 6. And this was David Meek, old school, very lovely gentleman, not anything like the rage baiters of social media today. And if they got a 6 or a 7, and as people know, those grades are given most of the time. Well, they used to be when newspapers had to be printed. Those grades were given at the 70-minute mark with 20 minutes to go. So often they didn't reflect a player's performance. You had to file those bits before you filed your piece. But yeah, I remember, what Sneaky Meeky giving me today. I remember being at the Cliff and training grounds and hearing them chat. So they have forgotten what it's like to be a player under attack, and they have no idea what it's like to be a player in this day and age. Where players are more emboldened, they've got more power, they can bite back on their Instagram accounts, and they don't have to enlist a journalist or sit. Mo Salah went in front of microphones. You can enlist journalists, but they don't. They have the power now. They have power. I know it's different, but look at Brooklyn Beckham yesterday. He just social media. He goes on his Instagram, woof, massive news story, and that's what they have the power to bite back. And I thought Martinez is quotes were pretty tame, really. I'll say it to my face or blah blah blah. He didn't need to, really. His performance spoke for itself, and I think Scholes and Butt made themselves look silly. And Keane, obviously I like Keane. Again, I've interviewed Keane many times over his career, enjoyed his company, and he's a great interviewer because he'll answer questions and do it directly, even when he was playing or just afterwards. But you do worry it's a tired old act now, really, and I feel, Carrick's wife, that was a bit unfortunate. I think Carrick's wife had snapped at him at social media 10 years ago, but God, he carries a grudge. She was just sticking up for her husband, and it's not that big a deal to bring it up now. The thing about Keane as well, what sort of he offers get stuck in, smash them sort of punditry rather than the tactics and the real insight that some people can offer. And I feel that I think even as a United fan, lucky enough to live throughout the whole of the Sir Alex Ferguson period, a lot of it close up as a journalist. It's different now. It's boring harking back to it thing. I remember it was about a year or so ago. I can't remember the game, but United had got a really good draw and they'd played well and they'd got a good draw. And if I look back, I could find it. And Keane was so mealy-mouthed, like, oh, look at them getting applauded off after a draw. In our day, they used to boo us after a draw. And I remember thinking, yeah, but it's not your day now. Things have changed, radically changed. Manchester City are pumped full of money. So are Chelsea. So is the Premier League. The smaller teams are Brighton, Brentford, Crystal Palace are so much stronger. Anyway, things have changed. United, unfortunately, are probably not going to dominate as much as they did in his reign. So I think obviously with their careers and they've always got interesting things to say, and I do listen. I do take sympathy with also their view, which is like, well, hang on, give us something good to talk about because we're watching a lot of awful football. I get that point, but belittling, excuse the pun, Lisandro Martinez the way they did them was too far.
Yes, they can have the point about give us something to be happy about, but that then ties back to what I said about them applying constructive criticism as opposed to just being so, unnecessarily negative about things. And I think the situation you have now, just in a couple of things you said, I didn't listen to the whole podcast, just certain sections. And while they did acknowledge that it's tongue in cheek I believe Scholes even said maybe we could have used slightly better words, but this is
Yes.
tongue in cheek, and it's not meant like that. And if you're playing for Manchester United, you need to be able to take these things on the chest. And I do think an awful lot of it at the stage that they're at now, they probably dug so far, they just continue to dig, because there's obviously a level of stubbornness there that won't allow them to get out of the situation that they're in, Sam, you know.
Well, I think it is a new era, because I think back to their time, I sort of said, you know, David Meek and his marks in the Manchester Evening News, but the whole former player, you know, you didn't get Brian Robson, Steve Bruce, Norman Whiteside, you know, that sort of player, the previous generation, you know, on podcasts, on social media, constantly on TV, constantly talking about them, you know. I mean, I think I remember, you know, Tommy Docherty, obviously driven by a bit of bitterness with his sacking from the club, was always a bit of a sort of renter quote about United during the, you know, Atkinson or early Ferguson period. And then obviously criticism died down because there was so much success for so long. But that just wasn't there. This cohort of former players just did not exist for them. They were doing other things. You know, Mark Hughes, Bruce, Robson, they were getting into management. They weren't sitting on sofas criticising the next generation.
Well, if anything, I suppose at least we saw the desired response on the field at the weekend. And long may that continue from a group of players who have, I think, far more to show than recent months and years have suggested. That said, it is important to acknowledge this, because recruitment is going to play a huge part if Omar Barada and co are to achieve their goals for Project 150. We saw an attempt to lure Antoine Semenyo fail at the beginning of the month. Suggestion now about a potential loan arrival in midfield, or even a cost-effective purchase to bolster the squad. This is something I spoke about with Jamie last week as well, because we see speculation of Ruben Neves potentially coming in January because he's out of contract in the summer. As I revealed yesterday morning, midfield does continue to be the number one priority at the club, and Elliot Anderson remains the number one target, although European football will play a significant role in his decision, I'm told. Carlos Baleba is also very highly thought of in Manchester, as is Adam Wharton. And I will say, despite suggestions of what I read this morning and late yesterday evening, João Gomes has been a player of interest for many months. He absolutely has. One thing is clear, is that Jason Wilcox and Christopher Vivell have targeted one, if not two, of those players. And when considering the importance of an assured engine room, players to accommodate the likes of Kobbie Mainoo and his continued growth, I think this is the pivotal decision of their tenure, outside of whether Carrick stays or whether they bring in this best-in-class manager to replace him. Who would you like the club to turn towards in the midfield section? And would you be confident, Sam, given what we have seen with Semenyo, that those names would see Old Trafford in the same light as 20 years ago?
Well, I still look. Yeah, I mean, Semenyo was obviously highly disappointing because he talked to us, but unfortunately, we have to swallow our pride and given a choice between what was then Ruben Amorim and a failing United with no European football and no cup football, or Manchester City and the revered Pep Guardiola. There was no choice there. That was unfortunate. You know, United did meet with him in the previous summer as well, and couldn't get a deal done, and then turned to Mbeumo, which obviously hasn't worked out badly at all. I think that with the midfield, a decision was made in the summer not to go for a midfielder and instead to put the money into Benjamin Sesko. This was Amorim sort of briefed that this wasn't his decision or his choice. He would rather have got a midfielder. I think Amorim would have rather Watkins over Sesko, but the club have pushed back on that and have said, well, no, he bought into going for a striker instead of a midfielder. I would suggest here at the halfway point, has that been a mistake? Yes, probably, because United have still looked very, very short in midfield. And the money spent on Sesko has delivered 5 goals. Now, I like Šeško, and I think there's a hell of a player there. And it's weird we're talking like this after he scored 2 great goals at Burnley and then a late consolation goal against Brighton. So you thought, right, well, here's the real player, and then he gets dropped and doesn't play at all. But yeah, I mean, obviously, no midfielder and a striker who's only scored 5 goals, that hasn't worked out. I think in the long term it could with Šeško. I feel that I mean, almost like in a maybe there might be a short-term loan or something just to bolster the midfield. I think clearly Mainu, Ugarte, and Casemiro and Mainu, as you saw against City, can do it on their day, but overall, that's not going to be enough. I think questions need to be asked how £50 million was invested in Manuel Ugarte. I mean, I just find that's shocking. I know that Ten Hag was resistant. He was more of a club signing, but that really is a terrible signing. I mean, he just offers very little. I think I mean. He can, and with the pedigree of a Uruguayan international and Sporting Lisbon and PSG, we expected a lot better. He really hasn't delivered at all. So the midfield obviously needs a huge upgrade, and as you said, maybe 1, maybe 2. I think Ugarte should be allowed to leave. I think Casemiro, I've really warmed to him, and I think these 4 years overall have been a success. The first season was absolutely wonderful. Then there was a massive drop off, and then he's got himself back because he's an absolute quality player, and it's wonderful to see. But obviously, with his age, this is he signed a 4-year contract which comes to an end. There's a possibility possibly to extend it, but with his wages, it won't be at that level. I think that if he could be persuaded to carry on as a sort of squad player, a bit of experience maybe, but I would imagine someone of his pride probably fancies a new challenge and something else. So that would leave you with sort of Kobbie Mainoo and Toby Collier coming back. I mean, the midfield would be pretty empty. So I feel that 2 have got to be signed. But I mean, the names you've suggested, yes, United are interested in all of them on the basis that they probably realise, they can't guarantee their number 1 choice, but I mean, I can't see 2 of 3 of Wharton, Baleba, and Anderson being brought in. That would cost north of 150 million. But who knows? I think a lot will depend, as you said, with in sense of Anderson. A lot will depend on who else is in for them. I feel we got lucky in a way that with Cunha and Mbeumo that bigger clubs weren't in for them, because I think they are top quality players. And I feel that having no European football to offer them, being 15th, to get those 2 players in that summer was a real success. I think, Semenyo, when he had the choice of City, went there. It will be, if Anderson has the choice of City or United, unfortunately, we look second best at the moment. But if City drop off and finish 3rd and United manage to get 4th or 5th, and they're both offering Champions League football, who knows? I mean, think about Wharton as well. He is a United fan, and that's...
He was previously offered to United as well.
Yes, I know. It's not quite up there with United's decision not to sign Caicedo for 5 million, or the one that obviously ignore Ole Gunnar Solskjaer telling them to get this young Norwegian lad called Erling Haaland. It's not quite up there, but yeah, it does look like it. He's an absolutely wonderful, beautiful player. The way he breaks the lines and finds passes, Wharton. I feel Baleba and Anderson are maybe more similar, sort of more all action, box to box, offering the full package. Wharton is that as well. He's probably less physical, but his passing is absolutely supreme. So if one of those could come, and there's got to be good odds on one of them coming, then I think United would certainly be in a lot better position for next season. Next to what we hope will be a rejuvenated Kobbie Mainoo, who would just have put the strange interlude in his career of that Ruben Amorim behind him by then.
Agreed, yeah. And if you were to look at one of the three of them, then there is additional options, like with Ruben Neves, as I said. You see Jimmy Garner is also being touted with a potential return. Obviously, he's drawing near the end of his contract as well. And if you can build a squad with players of that particular calibre with Premier League proven ability, then that's always a good thing. As we know in football and sport, momentum is the major factor for any player in side. If United can continue to progress on for the remainder of this season, as you said, if they can get into those Champions League places, not only are you offering the allure of history, but also European football and this enticing project that is there, then who knows what players want, and maybe that will be enough to get United over the line against intense competition. But with all eyes now really only on Premier League following early exits from both domestic cups, this group of players, they're going to have ample time to prepare for each outing. And that obviously begins with Arsenal in London on Sunday. Perhaps we saw signs of that same old Arsenal at the weekend, Sam, in failing to truly capitalise on City's defeat with a win of their own. And then when you look at the fact that they have European football during the week in Italy, there's further pressure and a more demanding schedule for Mikel Arteta. And I think that's a real talking point at this moment in time. I don't think there's ever going to be a good time to play that side in their own ground, especially when they have been as good as they have. But I just can't help but feel, alongside the fact that I firmly believe we should have beaten them in August, I think that they've been looking rather gettable of late. And I believe they know that. So with the momentum that Carrick's men have collected, all of a sudden I think there's a different dynamic in this fixture. Maybe you can call me getting a bit too jumpy, but I can't see the level of performance that we saw against City dropping so soon. How are you feeling ahead of Sunday and Arsenal?
I do feel confident. Obviously, I mean, in a strange way, I might have been not confident is the wrong word, but not overly fearful, because even under Amorim, United had a strange ability. You know, went to the Emirates last year and knocked them out of the FA Cup on penalties. Went to Anfield and got a draw last year. This year went to Anfield and won. Went to City last year and won. United seem to strangely have this ability to pull out a performance against the bigger teams. Obviously, I think, you know, the counter attack and the opposition, the superior opposition having more of the ball helped them. And I feel like so already that being the case, and then Carrick comes in and turns it on, I think, you know, the mood will immediately lifted, and I think they'll go into that really, really confident. Obviously, Arsenal have got Inter Milan this week. So they've got an extra game, and they'll be nervous too. That, I mean, I feel, you know, we obviously did them a huge favour in the title race by beating Manchester City, but they haven't closed the deal. They've been close for several years now, so they'll be a bit nervous. But I feel United, you know, if they can turn on the same performance, they can beat anybody. They really can. I mean, City are the second best team in the league. They've got the best striker in the world, and United managed to comfortably beat them. So there's no reason that they can't go to Arsenal and do the same again. Because, as we said earlier, the performance against City wasn't just a couple of players having a good game and a smash and grab. It was the absolute dominance. So maybe it'll be difficult at the Emirates to dominate as much, but just use that as the template, and you know, good things could happen.
I would tend to agree. And, you know, something that you drew reference on, the starting 11 against City, it not only highlighted some of the strength and depth that we have now returning on the bench, but it also raised a lot of questions about the decision to drop Matheus Cunha and the informed Sesko, as you said. Now, as we know, the selection and the tactics were spot on. So there is every chance that we see a repetition against Arteta. However, when I sort of peel this back, and given the height that they have in defence and their own reliance on set pieces, when you consider United's success this season, it should be very interesting. But you'd have to wonder if the likes of Sesko will return, given his size and aerial stature. Not to mention the man Scholes and Butt can't stop raving about. So would you anticipate significant changes to the team in London, or do you think he'll go with the tried and tested?
It's difficult, isn't it? Because I do think Šeško was on form, still is on form. I think, his size, Arsenal got quite muscular and aggressive centre backs. I mean, I think he would be a handful for them. But he didn't even get on the pitch. So Carrick's thinking, if it doesn't, it's not. I mean, obviously, different opposition, different home and away, cause for different things. But he might be tempted to think, well, it works so well, carry on. But it, like that horrible football cliche, it's a nice problem to have. And I think 3 or 4 weeks ago, United's bench was, I would say, probably the weakest it's ever been. I think it was the Newcastle game when Jack Fletcher made his debut. I mean, literally, Jack Fletcher for Xerxes was our efforts to try and hold on to a lead or win the game. I think that might have been the weakest bench we had for a long time. And now suddenly, the bench played its role on in the win against City. Cunha came off the bench, got an assist, should have got 2 assists. Mount came off the bench, should have scored, should have kept that goal. So there are options. I wouldn't be surprised either way. I wouldn't be surprised if Šeško started. And likewise, I wouldn't be surprised if he feels just comfortable. No, this worked for me now. Let's give it a go. And then you have Šeško off the bench. You have options. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, I'm going to say one last thing. You're a man who obviously doesn't hide his feelings online. You're never afraid to share your dissatisfaction with goings on at the club at a particular time. So considering everything that we have discussed and everything that we expect to come at the weekend, give us a scoreline. How do you see it playing out?
Oh dear. Well, I mean, I find it hard to.
Will Manchester United win against Arsenal in their own ground? Do you see it happening?
I can see it's possible. If I was to be boring and sit on the fence, I think maybe there's a 1-1 or a 2-2 there. But could United win? Yes, I think we absolutely could win. I feel that we're a lot less vulnerable to losing, but Arsenal obviously top of the league and a good side. But I would say if I was pushed for a sensible prediction, I would probably say a draw. But I think United can certainly win, easily win.
Well, I think if you rewind a week and you asked the United fan base, would you take 4 points from City and Arsenal? I think everybody would have taken your hand off for that. So I don't think too many people would be disappointed if it was a draw. But I just have this little sneaking feeling in the back of my mind that says we're going to go there and we're going to do it.
Shaun, I like that feeling.
I do think so. My man, as always, a pleasure chatting. And thank you, kind listener, for lending me your ear once more. If you haven't already done so, could I ask you to like and subscribe wherever you are listening and leave a review if you'd be as kind. Also be sure to check out our daily ramblings and exclusives at the official Theatre of Red website, and continue sending your emails through to us at editor@theatre-of-red.com. I will be back next week to catch up on whatever happens between here and then and in London. So until then, take care and catch you soon.